What's up, everyone? It's Mike here from The Art of Guitar. I'm just in the middle of a break. We're shooting all the notation videos right now for the website, so if you want to learn how to read actual notation, that's something you might want to visit. Anyways, I'm here to talk about a list of things that the most popular, the busiest, the most professional musicians, the things that they rarely do. And I like to phrase it that way because sometimes it's easier to remember what not to do than what to do. And over the course of all these years, I've been playing in the music scene since I was 16 years old. And so I've been able to compile a lot of information about this topic, and I wanted to share it with you guys. And hopefully it helps you out if you're looking to become a working musician, which we already know is kind of a tough thing to do in the first place. So if you have a little bit of a head start with this information, that's what it's here for. Okay, so some of these are going to seem a little bit obvious, but sometimes they need to be heard again just to really instill them in your mind because they're very important. And in a world where there's a lot of great guitar players, sometimes you go, well, what's going to set me apart from other guitar players? How am I going to get the gigs when everyone else is fighting to get them? And what I've found from personal experience and from other friends that I know that play a lot, these are the things that we try never to do, okay? And so the first thing that you want to try not to do is to show up late for gigs, for practices, for any appointments that you set up with people that you want to work with. And this might sound kind of funny coming from me because I'm usually late for everything else. But when it comes to band practice or it comes to showing up at a gig, I'm always on time. First of all, because I just don't like the stress of showing up late. It adds stress to the rest of the band because they're like, where is he? You know, we're about to go on. It's always a bad feeling. Also, I like to get there just in case we have any issues going on with gear or with booking time. Sometimes I show up early for a show and they go, good thing you showed up early. We're actually going to go on before we thought we were going to. So being on time is very important, if not early to a gig. I know it's an obvious one, but sometimes it has to be heard. Another thing busy musicians don't do is show up unprepared. So the best musicians I know, they always have worked on the material. They're ready to go. They're ready for any changes if need be. Let's say there's a B list of songs that they're supposed to learn just in case. They're always ready to go. And if they're really professional, you know, they've done this so many times that they think of it as a job and it's not just some throwaway hobby that some people think of it as. You'll see that the people that go into the professional world of being a musician and think of it like a hobby or like it doesn't really matter, they don't last very long because all of a sudden they show up unprepared and the person who hired them goes, you know what, this other guy sounds like a better choice or this other girl sounds like a better choice or whatever. So it's a quick way to get yourself booted off the circle. Just showing up unprepared a few times and proving that you're not dependable. Not too long ago, I was on stage with a group of professionals, and it was so funny. After we got done with the song, we hit the last note, and then there was dead silence at practice. And the singer's like, okay, let's try to do this. And there was nobody noodling on stage. There's, you know, the drummer wasn't practicing rolls or anything. And I realized that I was on stage with pros. And professionals don't sit there and noodle on their instruments. That's a big giveaway that you're an amateur, is if you're either working on the next song that's coming up or you just noodle because you don't know what to do with your hands or whatever. So the best musicians I know, they rarely noodle on stage unless they're just having fun or whatever, but they keep it professional. It's very important. And so don't be that person in the corner making all the noise when the rest of the band's trying to discuss what they're doing, okay? This is super annoying, even in regular life. When someone makes a mistake and then they blame someone else or something else for their mistake. And sometimes you're in this perpetual trap and you don't even realize you're doing it because the first thing you do when you're a kid and you get in trouble is you try to blame someone else. You know, it's just something we're born into, I think. We don't want to feel the pain of being guilty of something, so we pass the blame on to something else. And sometimes that doesn't leave people for a long time, sometimes never. But you'll be on stage with somebody who's not very professional and they'll make a mistake and they'll blame something that you wouldn't believe. Like one time I had a guy make a mistake on stage and it was a student of mine and I just went up to him during the song and I'm just like, what happened, you know? And he's like, oh, the drummer didn't look at me like he always does on that spot, so I missed it. And I was thinking, if you're depending on someone else to look at you to let you know what your part is, then you're the one to blame, you know? So that's just a small example, but that happens to some people. So don't get in that blame trap where you're blaming other people. Be sure to own up to your own mistakes. That's the only way to get better. Professional musicians that are working a lot rarely, if ever, treat rehearsal like personal practice. And I remember my good friend Mark Malman, he said, you know what, this is rehearsal, it's not practice, so know your part. And I thought about that, I'm like, that's so true. You don't want to show up to rehearsal. I call it rehearsal more now than practice. Sometimes I call it practice, but you're going there to rehearse what you've already practiced at home. So a professional musician will know their parts. They've already done all the practicing at home, and then when they come to the group, it's a rehearsal. You're just there to perform the songs together and work out little things. You're not there to all of a sudden go, okay, how does this part go now? That's always the mark of an amateur. Try not to overstep your role in a band. And like I said before in previous videos, this was a huge Achilles heel for me because I'm so used to teaching all the time that sometimes if somebody's not quite doing something right, I'll say something. Like I was in a band, I want to say recently, but it was like 5 years ago, and the drummer wasn't playing the beat right, and my instinct was just to say, "Oh, it actually goes like this," and I didn't mean anything negative by it, but he kind of took it as, "Who's this guy telling me what to do?" You know, so I overstepped my boundary in that band. I was just a hired person. I didn't really have to. I didn't have any right to tell the drummer what to do. And let's say you join a band and the singer is just hiring you to play some shows, which happens with me a lot. Well, the singer is the boss. If they want you to go barefoot on stage, I'm going to do that. I remember one time I showed up in jeans and he's like, no jeans on stage. And I had to change. I just was like, okay, you're paying me to do this. I'm a working musician. I have to do what the boss says, you know? In the bands where I'm the boss, then I tell people what to wear. I really try not to, but that's the time when I would be allowed to do that. Let's just put it that way. This is funny because when I wrote this one, the very next gig I had gear issues. So what I wanted to say is that busy working musicians rarely have a lot of gear issues. What I really meant by that is I don't mean that a tube blew up or something very unexpected, even though you can have backups of things to help prepare for those situations. I just mean people who don't take care of their gear or they don't play enough to where they don't keep their gear updated or upgraded. So they'll have old strings, they'll have cables that go bad, or they're already going bad and they know it, but that's all they have. And so a real professional musician will have all that taken care of. So if anything does happen, they have maybe a plan B. Like I started bringing a backup amp to gigs after a while because one show my amp went out and I was just kind of, deer in the headlights. I didn't know what to do. So to prepare for that and to prepare for anything is a sign of professionalism. But the worst thing you can do is have tentative gear and not do anything about it before the show. The best working musicians I know rarely overplay, and if they do, it's just to have fun or the moment calls for it, for them to just go off. If you ever notice, I don't try to, if you ever notice when I play in my videos, I try not to overdo things. I try to just play what is needed. I think that's because I learned that discipline on stage. When I first started, I was in a metal band, so I could go crazy if I wanted to. But then in the other bands that I was in, I had to sort of accept my role as I have to do what the song calls for. And it really taught me some more mature ways to look at music, I think. And so even in my teaching, I try not to overdo things. Here's every tap sequence you can do. Here's a million miles an hour, that kind of stuff. You could do that in your basement, or if you're doing your instructional videos or your own YouTube channel or whatever, impress people that way. But when it comes to a professional gig, you'd be surprised how much that can annoy other people. I think Gene Simmons was trying out guitar players for Kiss, and he said sometimes they would come in and just overplay, and it sounded like just a bunch of bees buzzing all over the place, is how he put it. He's like, it wasn't very musical. And so I kind of took that to heart. I'm like, that's where I was. I was just the noisemaker. I wanted to play really fast and impress people. It was a lot of ego stuff. So when I heard Gene Simmons talk about that, not that Gene Simmons doesn't have an ego, but he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the music business. So I understood what he meant by that. They're a professional band. They need someone who can fit the band musically and probably visually too in that case. This one's going to get some controversy, but the best working musicians that are hired to play rarely overdo the drugs and booze. And some people will say, oh, that's not true. There's tons of musicians that totally get crazy. And that is true, but a lot of the times you're talking about the people in original bands that are out playing together on the road or whatever, they might be getting crazy. But when it comes to being a hired gun, a hired musician in a band, you do not want to show up messed up or, spend half the time during the break out in your car getting all crazy and then come back and then not be able to do your job. I've known one or two people that can pull that off when they're completely gone. They can play really well, but that's super rare. Most of the time, 90, 98, 99% of the time, the musicians keep it together at least till after the show. So overindulging in that kind of stuff can definitely wreck your career when it comes to music. So be careful there. One time we played a show and this guy was I don't know, 8 beers in or something. And then right before the show, they started playing. And all of a sudden, you hear the guitar stop every once in a while. And we all looked over, and the guitar player was leaning against the wall so that he wouldn't fall over. And then what happened? The band, just everyone in the band kept looking over. Like the singer was really mad. You could just see it in his eyes every time he looked over. And the guy couldn't do anything about it. He was gone. So he tried to make it through the set. I mean, he was basically bouncing on one foot half the time. It was ugly. So don't be that guy, all right? This is very common, and sometimes people don't realize they're doing it, but the best musicians I know rarely bring bad vibes to the group. With one bad apple, it can really spoil the whole band. So one time I was playing with somebody, and they always had a negative energy, and they're just overly sarcastic, but not in a funny way. It was in a way that was just kind of always tearing other people down. And every time I was on stage with the person, I just felt it, and it affected my playing. And I had to get out of that band just because I felt it all the time, and I didn't look forward to it anymore. So what you want to do is you don't want to be that person that brings the bad energy to a group, the negative vibration, whatever you want to think of it as. Try to at least be neutral. So if you're having a bad day, have the awareness to just leave that aside. Be present, do your gig, and then go home and freak out or whatever you got to do. But try not to bring that stuff into the group because it does poison the whole bunch. And then there's some responsibility that sometimes I forget about, and you shouldn't be double booking yourself. And when you start to get busy, this is when this can happen. This is why I'm going to mention this, is because you might start getting a lot of gigs, and next thing you know, you get an email from this person, can you play this night? A call from this person, and next thing you know, or you make some verbal commitments with somebody, next thing you know, you get a call, you're about to go to a show, and someone else is like, where are you, man? I've done that before, where I've double booked a night, and that was a terrible feeling because you're like, you have to go with the band that you said yes to first, no matter what, even if the other one's paying a lot. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to buckle down a little bit and get responsible with your calendar. I like to have an actual physical calendar where I can write things down because then I see it every day. I do use Google Calendar, but sometimes I don't know, sometimes I make a mistake or I don't hit save, or I don't know what I'm doing half the time. So I'll look at the calendar and nothing will like light up. So I'll think there's nothing going on, but if you click on that day, there's actually a gig booked. So I've gotten a lot better at that over the years, but that did take some really bad situations for it to really sink in. Because I'm pretty dense when it comes to things. Sometimes it takes a lot of pain for me to figure something out. So that's why I'm bringing that to you now, so you can avoid that problem. Okay, so that's the list I came up with. Hopefully that'll help some of you guys avoid some potential pain in the future. And if you have any other ones that you want to offer, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I'd like to hear from your experiences, what you've learned as well. Okay, all right, guys, still working on those artist series that should be coming out pretty soon, I would say within a couple of weeks. And don't forget to check out the new notation section of the website. A lot of people say, I don't need to learn how to read music, but along with it comes tons of theory that we're working on. So it's being built now, so we're up to the 6th string. We went 1 through 6, and now we're going to start to really get into the fun stuff. So check that out at theartofguitar.com, and we'll catch you guys soon. Thanks.